Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be walking you through some of the books I'm planning to read up until the end of this year. Now this list is not definitive by any means. I'm very much a mood reader, as I've said before, and I'm definitely not going to be able to get to all of these books, but I've created a collection of books that at one point or another in the next couple of months I'll want to get to. So let's jump right in. The first book is the first book in the War for the Rose Throne series by Peter McLean. This series I'm super excited about. I know for a fact that if I start that first book and I love it, I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole series. It's a story that just seems super compelling to me. So I've said to myself that if there is one series that I start and finish by the end of this year, it's going to be this one. The next is a book by Brian Lee Durfee called The Forgetting Moon. It's a epic fantasy full of lots of adventure and action. I'm planning to read this potentially at the end of this month with two of my friends, but we're still trying to figure out the best time to read it. It is quite the tome, but I'm excited. I've only heard really good things about it. The next series is by Daniel Abraham called The Long Price Quartet. I mentioned this in my previous video, or one of my previous videos, and this is a series that I'm super excited to jump into. I've only heard amazing things about LPQ, and it sounds like the sort of book that is right up my street, especially given that it's incredibly focused on characters. So LPQ I think is probably going to be next month. I'm super excited. The next three books on my list are the only way I will read them is if I'm able to take some time off of work. I haven't had any time off work in over a year. It's been intense, and we're coming to a point now in the business where I might potentially be able to take a week, maybe even 2 weeks off. And if I do take a week off, even if it's just a week, even if it's a couple of days, what I plan to do is I plan to binge the rest of the Joe Abercrombie standalones. So I've read Best Served Cold, but I have yet to read Heroes, and I'm yet to read Red Country and Sharp Ends, the short story collection. So if I get that week off this year, before the end of this year, that is what I'm going to read. It's going to be a Joe Abercrombie filled week, and I'm just going to blitz through them. Next is a book that I mentioned in my haul, and that is The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. I've heard pretty mixed things about this now. When I released my video, whenever it was, a couple of weeks back or a couple of days back, depending on when I released this video, I had some people reach out to me and tell me some constructive criticism about the book. So I've got a more balanced view of the book now, but Angela and I are planning to read this at some point in the next kind of month or two. But I'm excited to still read it. I've heard it's still a good time. You don't necessarily need to take it too seriously. So that's definitely still on my radar for this year. This next one I'm super excited about because I've heard the political intrigue is very Machiavellian, but it's set in a kind of fantasy-rich world, and that is The Counselor by E.J. Beaton. I have heard amazing things about this from a number of people. I know Klaus did a rave review about it, and I think the brothers Gwyn really love it as well, and it just seems like this perfect balance between kind of historical fiction but also fantasy amongst this backdrop of just great political intrigue. And that sounds right up my street. It sounds like something that I could probably read on a weekend if I'm really into it. And I'm definitely planning to read this year. I'm planning to read it with Angela and Alan. So yeah, Counselor by E.J. Beaton. The next one is a book by ADRIAN SELBY. ADRIAN SELBY I have raved about a number of times now on my channel. Go and read him, go and buy his books. He is phenomenal. And we are planning to read Brother Red, potentially Snakewood, but I think we're probably going to end up reading Brother Red instead, potentially at the end of this month or next month. It depends on when we read The Forgetting Moon. But I'm excited to go back into his world. There's not really much more to say to it than that. The next one I actually added to my list recently. Two people whose book opinions I really, really respect, Angela and Alan, have been warring about Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. I wasn't planning to read that this year, but it's divided them in such a remarkable way that I'm really curious now, because I feel like my tastes really align with the two of them, and they both have very similar tastes as well. So I've kind of put it on my list now as a potential one to read by the end of this year. I'll kind of have to see kind of what mood I'm in, but it previously wasn't even on my radar. But now I've prioritized it as a potential series that I pick up. Next one is a buddy read of Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan, first book in the Padme's trilogy. I mentioned this before in a previous video that seems to be very, very divisive, especially amongst people whose opinions that I really respect. So I'm going to read it and see where I land on that spectrum. The next one is a new one that I actually purchased recently. I believe it was either Katrina or Ina who recommended this to me. I've been looking for a fantasy romance because I've been reading a lot of dark fantasy recently, and sometimes it's nice just to change it up a little bit and go with something a little bit more lighthearted. Not necessarily lighthearted, but going with different themes, right? And this book is called The Savage Lands by Stacey Marie Brown. I haven't really heard much about it. All I know is the romance is a really core tenet of the book. And you know what? I love a good fantasy romance now and then. Next one is a short story. It's The Unexpected Guest by Agatha Christie. It's about 150 pages. I'll be able to read it in one sitting. I'm not really into crime thrillers that much, or like kind of detective thrillers or whatever you want to call it. But Agatha Christie is an author that I've never read, which is crazy to me. And I mentioned that my mum was like laughing at me that I've never read any Agatha Christie. So we're going to rectify that before the end of this year. We're down to 2. So the penultimate book that I'm planning to read, or is on my list of books to read, is The Arabian Nights, translated by Hussein Hadawi. The Arabian Nights, I cannot believe I've never read The Arabian Nights. It's something that's referenced so much, and yet I don't think a lot of people have read it, which is fine. But I thought it was crazy, and I went to my local bookstore and I saw that they had this really beautiful copy, and I've been recommended the Hussein Hadawi translation a number of times, so I thought I'd just pick it up. Evie and I are planning to kind of slowly buddy read it. We haven't figured out an exact time yet, but I'm excited to read it with her. And I'm excited to dive into a world that, you know, we hear so much about and is referenced quite a lot, I think. And then last but not least, I mentioned this in one of my previous videos, and that is Cain and Abel by Jeffrey Archer. I've never read any Jeffrey Archer, which is, again, sacrilege according to my mum, but I think I'm going to read that one next month because I'm ready to take a step out of fantasy for a bit and read something a little bit different. So there you have it. There's my potential TBR for the next 3 to 4 months. It's very possible that I won't read any of those. It's very possible that I might read all of them or half of them, or who knows. But let me know if any of those are on your TBR for the next couple of months. Excited to hear your thoughts, excited to hear what you're reading, and I will see you in the next video. Stay safe, everybody. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.